I deserve romance. Like, I deserve for somebody to come up to me and probably I don't like you if you are so afraid of me. So then we shouldn't be together. But then that was always my experience in Spain. This was also why my ex was actually somebody that I met online, and she came to Spain from a whole different country to live with me, obviously, because lesbians. But dating in Spain for me was not a thing, because even on the apps, would never get a match. And if I would get a match, I remember once this last year, this woman was like, yeah, but I'm not sure because I had a thing with a Black woman one time and like she ghosted me. So now I think all Black women are like this. And I was thinking, wow, she really typed that and hit send. So I was noticing that I was going to have to educate these people. And I didn't feel like it. So dating for me in like the lesbian community, rough.
Welcome to Flourish in the Foreign, the award-winning podcast that celebrates, elevates, and affirms the voices and stories of Black women living and thriving abroad, while exploring living abroad as a pathway to wellness. I'm your host, Christine Job, a Black American with Trinidadian roots, business strategist and writer from Atlanta, based in Valencia, Spain. Hey everyone, welcome back to Flourish in the Foreign. If you're new, welcome to your new favorite podcast. Yes. All right, one of your new favorite podcasts. I am your host, Christine Job. And before we get into this week's episode, I wanted to chat to y'all very briefly. Last week, I was invited to talk about how I built this here podcast and how building this podcast has led me on my author journey. And that was really interesting because I went back and listened to the episode I created back in, I think it was late 2022, called How She Built This, where I talked about how I came up with Flourish in the Foreign, and I had some friends discuss the behind the scenes of it. And not only was it super emotional, but also it was just really interesting because as I'm speaking to you and as this episode is being released, it is February 2025. I recorded my first episode of Flourish in the Foreign with one of my best friends, Niana, in February 2020. And my friend Niana is visiting me currently in Valencia from the Netherlands. So it's just like, I don't know, it was really dope. Very, very happy about that. I bring that up because if you are on a creator journey or an entrepreneur journey, I think maybe listening to it could be, I don't know about inspirational, but at least give you some insight as to how and why I did my thing. I think I should probably do an updated episode about it, especially now as I'm becoming an author and I've had a lot more opportunities and experiences. So let me know if you want to hear that. But I just want to use that as encouragement. Like a lot of times people think, I don't know what I'm doing and what's it going to be? And I'm going to suck. It's going to be janky. And I had all those thoughts and feelings. And look at me. It's going to be 5 years in May and I'm doing the damn thing. And my whole life is really changed because of this podcast. And it's not hyperbolic. My life has changed because of this podcast. So I'm just saying, if you need a little kick in the pants, I hope that was it for you. I hope that you believe in yourself. I hope that you bet on yourself. I hope that you just know that you can figure things out. And I hope that you know that you have a voice worth listening to and you have a service that people are craving and wanting. And it's up to you to really be of service and be in alignment in that. So that's all I'll say about that. The last thing is, I mentioned in the previous episode how I'm going to try, if there's enough questions, to put together and ask me, Christine, ask a guest any guest or ask an expert anything episode at the end of season 6. Okay. Season 6 is scheduled to wrap in early May, maybe late April. It depends on how I feel. So don't wait. Don't delay. Get your question in today. You can either email me your question at hello@flourishintheforeign.com, or you can find the link to leave me a voice note in the description of this episode. So just click on it and leave me a note, and I will include your voice in an episode. Or if you don't want me to include your voice, you can say, don't include my voice, and I won't. You're going to ask me your question. Okay? I encourage you to take advantage of it while I do it, because I'm also not going to wait to put this episode together till like April. I'll probably wait till maybe like the end of March, because I've recorded everything else. So everything else is recorded. So get your question in today. All right. Let's get into this week's episode. Season 6, Episode 7. Today's guest is Joanne Joanne is a sustainability coordinator working in the field of institutional real estate investment. She is currently based in Amsterdam, where she lives with her 8-year-old cat, Sahara. After spending 5 transformative years in Barcelona, she brings a wealth of experience from her time living in different cultures. And as a semi-retired artist, she stays connected to the arts by advising the Amsterdam Fund for the Arts. I really enjoyed chatting with Joanne and getting her perspective in her time abroad. So with that, I'm going to let Joanne tell you all about it.
My name is Joanne. I'm 30 years old and I'm currently in Amsterdam. And my hometown is Culemborg, which is a Dutch little town. It's a small town in the center of Holland, where I came when I was 5 years old from Suriname in South America. And that town really shaped me in a way where I wanted to run far away from it. That wanting to run away from Culemborg has shaped a lot of my life, my decisions, and also how I am as a person, I think. The way we feel and the way I feel here is that we always say I'm Surinamese Dutch, so Surinaams Nederlands, we would say in Dutch. So it's a duality. I always say that in my home, I was in Suriname, and outside, I was in Holland. So I was raised like a Surinamese person. My parents are Maroons. There's a lot of culture and pride, and I was raised like that. But the moment I go outside, I'm in Holland, and I'm very Dutch, and I realized how Dutch I was when I moved to Spain.
I asked Joanne to share more about her Surinamese heritage and specifically her Maroon culture, as I know some of y'all may not be really familiar with who Maroons are.
Suriname is a ex-colony of Holland, so our official language is Dutch. But during slavery, there was a group of African Indian slaves who escaped and they rioted. It was mostly women, women-led. They would burn plantations. They would free their friends and families. And they all went into the rainforest of South America. So they are deep into the rainforest and they were able to maintain their culture, maintain their being, like our DNA is still 100% African. And we also have languages that are similar to certain African tribes still, and the ways of doing things. Like when I was 6 weeks old, I was for the first time allowed outside. I was entered into society. There's a lot of rituals. The whole like binding after your pregnancy is something that we still do. And it's, the elder women in your family do that for you. So we have a lot of things that we maintain. But in our own country of Suriname, we are very much oppressed and seen as savages, because what would happen is, imagine you and your sister decides to flee and decides to riot and decides to fight back, and you stay and you're afraid. Then what would happen is that the white slave masters, they would tell the sister to stay behind. You either go and get your sister or we'll kill you. So it created this rivalry between people, we call them city Creoles, that stayed in the city, and people that are in the rainforest. Even though slavery was abolished because of Maroons, they were told that we were just horrible people that didn't speak Dutch and were savages, were Black. And my generation is the first generation where we are sort of accepting of each other more and more, but our family and stuff like that is much different. So I'm very proud of my roots, but it's weird to know that even though here in Holland, Surinamese people as a whole have done a lot for to like fight racism. The same people when they go to back home are part of the people that oppress me or that like are not so nice to me. So there is a lot there, but it's a beautiful, beautiful country.
I was curious to know if there was a racial caste system that still exists in Suriname, and if so, how that also immigrated to the Netherlands.
Oh, it's interesting that you say that because so we have people from India, right? Because Suriname is it's like one like Jamaica and stuff. It's a mixed country because after slavery was abolished, they went to get Indian servants. So from India, from Java, and later Chinese people came to work. And the people from India, they brought some sort of caste system a little bit. But if you would take the idea of a caste system, you could say, yeah, we do have like a certain system of who is considered closer to whiteness and closer to what is okay. And then the Maroons and the indigenous Surinamese people would be the lowest, as we are in the forest, as my mom's family doesn't speak Dutch because you only speak Dutch if you go to school and if you want to. And I think they would be considered like the people that are most behind. Whereas I think they're the ones who are like the most amazing. But Suriname only has one city, and imagine the country is 10 times bigger than Spain, but majority of people only stay in one city because that's where they feel like, it's better. And they don't actually ever will go into the rainforest. They won't actually explore because they're so far removed from it. So yeah, and have they brought it here? They have tried. I think for a while, the Surinamese people that were here were still maintaining the same structures of who is considered educated. But at this point, most of us, like I'm second generation, but most people, Surinamese people here are third or fourth generation. So now it's not as intense anymore. But you notice when people from Suriname come here for the first time, that sometimes they still think that it's the same as in Suriname.
I asked Joanne to describe her experience growing up in the Netherlands.
So I have two siblings, and my experience is very different from my younger siblings in the way where I had a very extreme experience when I came to Holland because we first moved to a more mixed neighborhood actually because Holland has a lot of immigrants that came to work here in the 80s, and I was surrounded by what I thought was like comrades because it was people from Morocco and also the Moluccan Islands because Holland also has history with Indonesia, of course. And in that moment, what happened is that they chose me as the weakest link. So in the neighborhood, all the other immigrants bullied me immensely, like for everything that made me black, for like my lips, my nose, and they were horrible to me. And then in school, it was the same in a way where, in one hand, I was being bullied a lot for my skin color because we also have this holiday with Black Pete. And when I was younger, Black Pete was black and had big lips and gold hoops and was dumb. And so the kids would always compare me with Black Pete, and the parents would also do that. Like, so let's say it's the month of Sinterklaas, which is when Black Pete comes, which is I think December, and November it's when it starts. The whole month, parents would jokingly say, "Oh, you're already here, Black Pete," and the kids would hear that. So it's taught behavior, even though when we all tried to abolish Black Pete, people had amnesia and said, "Oh, kids don't realize they do." And so that was my experience, and I was constantly trying to be accepted. I would, we want to play with people, like, go to, because I don't know how it's in the States, but in Holland, it's very normal. After class, you go play with somebody at somebody's house, and it's very casual, all these things. And I would never get asked. And if I would get asked, they would then cancel, or they would say yes one time, and then they would never say yes again. So it was this constant trying to get approved by them. And my mom, she would see that, and she would just, in one hand, not understand why I would keep going and keep wanting to be accepted by them. But she also couldn't deal with me being insecure about it. And much, much later, I realized how it's so different to immigrate when you're older, because she immigrated when she was older from a Black country. So she didn't get when I asked her, like, can I be white? And like, because I would ask her if I could wash it away. And she would be like, what is wrong with you? And she couldn't relate to me, and the school couldn't handle it. So that's how I left the middle school. In high school, I was still very insecure, but at somewhere I had decided that I was just gonna be an outlier in a way. And just so, in one hand, I spent a lot of time of my life growing up then wanting approval from people, like wanting community, and therefore being able to be around a lot of different people and being able to code switch and being able to like change my behavior a little bit. And in the other hand, I still did whatever I wanted. When I was 20, I think I moved to Amsterdam, not for school, not for a job. I just wanted to go to Amsterdam. And then I had like a whole awakening in like queerness and just going outside. And I was just very much doing everything I wanted to do. But still, there was this emptiness inside of me because I didn't really like myself. But I had so many friends and then in all different kind of communities and in the art world or in anarchism or in more like sports everywhere, music. And then one day I decided that I wanted to do like product design because I felt like it would be nice to do something where it was artsy, but I could use it in a social setting. Because my idea was that I was going to create like a design school in Suriname. So I applied to a school, to a product design school. I got accepted. Was miserable. Like even though I loved the designing, but I was miserable because I was just really just like still so lost in a way. And I couldn't focus on all these things. So when the moment came that it was possible that I could do an Erasmus, like a 6 months abroad studying, I took it and I applied and I chose a school in Barcelona that told me that they were in English, but it was all Catalan. But I took it in 2019, I think it was. And I went for 6 months and stayed for 5 years. So I graduated from Spain. And in Spain, it's when I think it all came falling down and I picked myself up for the first time for real. And then I left in a way where I think I finally like found me. But I think that's why I started with my experience very different than my siblings because they were never bullied and they never experienced any of this because they're a little bit younger than me and it was already a big difference. So they have a very much more like calm experience here, but my experience was like a very typical experience with racism here, and that influenced everything. It influenced my whole personality.
I wanted to know Joanne's family's thoughts on leaving the Netherlands to move to Spain.
They thought I was crazy because even though my sister, like, she went to an international high school and everything, I was like the lost puppy, right? And by that time, that spring before the September year would start, I had finally like been sort of closely started finding like some kind of normalcy because I was going to therapy and they gave me so many medications. So they felt like if I do this now, this wild thing, going to Spain by myself, I'm gonna break down. And so they weren't happy at all. And it was almost also asking, but what did your therapist said? Who was neutral because she's a therapist, but they didn't like the idea. They didn't like the idea at all. I don't think I do things expecting support in a way. So and that's something that has sometimes gotten me in trouble with people or my family mostly is because I've very young realized that my experience is very different and that I would have to do things my way. So I didn't tell them with the idea that they had to approve or support me because I assumed that everything by that time that I had done wasn't really something that they liked. And so they were used to it in a way as well. I also wanted to prove them wrong a lot. And I just did it because back then I was very impulsive as a person, as young. So I just did it now and I went. And I think that they did later on think that it was a good decision, but in the beginning, no, they weren't supportive at all, and I ignored it. I just really did.
I asked Joanne to describe her day of departure when she left the Netherlands and moved to Spain to study.
It was a morning, and my sister brought me. We went to the taxi, and I remember thinking, "What am I doing? Like, what am I doing? There you go again! Like with your like crazy ideas." And I felt so excited, but afraid, so afraid, but so excited and so delusional. Like I was, grand ideas. And then I remember getting there and going outside, sitting somewhere with my first like sangria, and sitting there in Les Courts and thinking, wait, did I just do this? And looking around me, because I'd been in Spain, you know, as a European, it's different. But this was different. Like, this was like my neighborhood. And I saw these people and I was sitting there and I was thinking about my parents. Like, I was thinking, like, wait, their daughter just did this. Like, why does she, like, what happened? Like, that was just, the first day was just surreal. Felt like a movie. Felt like you are you're like in a movie theater and you're watching yourself. That's how I remember the table. I remember the sangria. I remember just like sitting there on the plaza and just like, what?
I asked Joanne to walk us through that first year in Spain. Now, y'all keep in mind that she started school in Barcelona in September of 2019.
Initially, I came for 6 months. So I was going to be there from September till February. But in my education system in Holland, I was supposed to do an internship from February on, but I was supposed to do it at home, back in Holland. So what I did, I chose a internship in Spain. So that's how it started. But initially, it was amazing in one hand, hard because the school ended up being Catalan and not English. I think one class was in Spanish. So I would leave school every day with a headache. And the school times, also things similar as here, can be very late. So I would have school sometimes at 1 and then have no class, and then the second one at 4. So it was a lot of headaches because I was listening to Spanish, and I had one very nice classmate from Canary Islands, a boy who would translate for me because he was one of the only ones who could speak a little bit of English. And it was actually the two only boys in my class who were nice to me. Because in general, I think the girls were a bit shy. And it was just, they are similar to Dutch people to me. There is this distance that we have. And they couldn't speak English, so I get it. And I couldn't speak Spanish. So my school was hard, but it was so good. The education system level was so high. In Holland, we have this idea that we are, as the Northern European countries, that we're smarter and like more serious and successful than Southern Europeans. And so I remember even when I applied to the school, my school teacher told me it's gonna be so easy. It wasn't. It was 6 months of torture. And everything that I know about design, I learned 6 months because it was just a really high level. So school-wise, it was rough, but we had so many holidays because there was constantly a bank holiday. And some teachers did started liking to me and to sort of try to translate a little bit. But for me, my life was mostly outside the school. Like it wasn't, again, I was just doing whatever. So it was mostly all the people I met outside of school, all the friends I made, all the free salsa classes. Before February, I had to look for an internship. And I wanted to stay in Spain. And I ended up finding one in FabLab, Barcelona, which is like this user space. They do the design, all these things. And I got an internship there that I didn't really understand what the internship was about, but I got it. And before I knew it, they were like, oh, you have to go home because it was the whole lockdown. And I did it from home. And that was really difficult because my internship was already very fake, but now doing it at home was even more fake. And I just spent most of my time on the rooftop because this place that I was at had a roof of the building. So I would go to the rooftop. I would just sit there. I would meet my friends. But the thing is, I was so happy. And that's also the the whole thing, that even though I was going through this really unreal period and this lockdown, and the Spanish lockdown was very long. Also, our rules were very long. Even after there was no lockdown anymore, we still had so many rules. I was so happy because my honeymoon phase was very long in Spain. Like the whole like phases of immigration, my honeymoon phase took years. And it was years of just like, everything is fine, everything is amazing, and nothing really bothered me ever. And in the beginning, first like 2 years, I think.
Since Joanne was in Spain for school, I was really curious to know how her time in Spain helped her to develop professionally, and if she had the opportunity to experience professional wellness while living in Barcelona.
The thing is that so studying was a side quest in my life. Because even though I did very, very well in high school, all these things, I went to just be a person. So I became a filmmaker, I did other things, and then I decided to study. So even during my studies, I was just working online or making films or giving advice to mostly Dutch art institutions. And I continued doing that before and after my studies, because at the times that I tried to work in Spain, I realized that first of all, my Spanish wasn't good enough to work in the field that I want to work in, which was going to be design or something, I don't know, in AI, something interesting. But it was going to be customer service or in a hotel. And I don't want to do that because in Holland, that's something that I did as a student and I didn't like it. And the customer service thing, I was like, I don't want to talk to people. That isn't my career. It isn't something that I think that is what I want to do with my life. And the times that I did that for a few months, I couldn't get with the hours because in Holland, we don't live to work. Same way in Spain, actually. But in Spain, they work a lot. And Dutch people, generally, like, for example, where I work now, full time is 4 days. Most women here work 2 days or 3 days. People clock out at 5. It's very work is like is this side quest that we do. Career is not the most important thing in our lives. And I realized that in Spain, working for a Spanish company, I would be there all the time, like so long, like they have like a 2 hour break or something, and I can't go home. I can just go earlier. I think again, now that I'm working on my Spanish and all these things, if I would go back to Spain and work there, it would have to be under so many terms. Like it would have to be from like, and to work from home. I'm working 4 days max, maybe 3. That's how it would work. But that's also why that was the main reason I left, because I thought, okay, like I'm 30 now. Let's get serious. Let's get like a career or something. Okay, my Spanish is not good enough to have a career here and to be paid the way I want to be paid, because I didn't want to be paid not well, knowing that I could get paid better in other European countries. So I said, let's leave, because in Spain, it wasn't going to happen for me. And my friends, some of them or like acquaintances, didn't get it who stayed, because they were working customer service or in a hotel and they were happy, and that's fine and that's amazing, but that wasn't interesting to me. I didn't do the side quest of a study to not use it in a way or to not use my brain, because otherwise I get bored.
Y'all know Blackness and womanhood, these are not monolithic identities. And so I was really curious to learn more about Joanne's experience. And I asked her to reflect upon what it is like being a Black European woman in Spain.
In the beginning, when I was in Spain, I understood why my mom didn't care about racism in Holland. I understood why my mom didn't think any of this was like that serious when it came to racism, and why it was the younger generation in Holland fighting racism. Because for me, going to Spain as, I think, what was I, 25, 24-year-old, my whole thing was, I don't know, y'all. You don't need to like me. I'm here. I know who I am. I already went through that with the white people where I'm from. You don't need to like me. You don't need to accept me. You and you have your own little thing going on. So if somebody's staring at me, I don't care. A lady being rude, I don't care. I know who I am, because I was a Dutch Surinamese person. That was who I was. I didn't need to convince anybody of these people, because I didn't want to be Spanish. Whereas when I'm a Dutch person, I wanted to be Dutch because I was a young girl, and I didn't need to be Spanish. I didn't need Spanish people to accept me. So the first few years, I was fine, and I didn't really also experience anything, because maybe if I didn't notice, and I would just like, I think one time somebody told me that a lady, like, she said something in Spanish, and back then I didn't understand Spanish, and I was like, okay, whatever, And in Holland, I would have been annoyed and sad and frustrated. So the first few years that it was like that, but then it changed when, in one hand, I lost a lot of my Black friends because of things that happened, or they left, because Barcelona is I call it a transit city. People don't stay; they leave Spain or they go somewhere, somewhere in Spain. So a lot of people that I met were mostly Black women. They all left, and I realized that they were like a cover, like they were like this protection actually. And I had a partner who is Afro Latina, and she's more masculine. So I noticed how people were treating her, how we would go, because we were living up in Barcelona. and there was a lot, because there's a lot of escalators and a lot of stairs outside, right? So we'd go down, and this lady was with a young girl, and she saw us, went back, and like waited for us to leave, and then came, and that kept happening. Or people would never sit around us anymore. Or so I noticed it being with a more masculine presenting Black person, how it was. And then when that relationship ended, I was by myself, because again, a lot of my friends had left, and navigating Barcelona by myself at that point in my life, that's when the shift happened. Because I remember a moment where I realized it. I was in Eixample, which is the neighborhood somewhere in the middle there, and it was in like the sort of the nicer part of Eixample, and it was already dark. I just moved to my new place, so I didn't know how to go back home, and my phone had died. So I needed to ask somebody the way. And in that moment, I realized that it was dark, and I'm a Black woman asking for help. And I saw how people were looking at me. So I saw how those ladies were like doing this, or like a bit confused, like, why is she standing there? Why is she asking me something? And I like wanted to cry, because I felt like I'm too old for this. I don't care anymore. It's been a long time that I don't care if y'all like me. Because even when I was in Amsterdam, I didn't care anymore, because I was already much older. I was like, I don't want to care about racism right now. Like, I guess this is old. So I like remember I ran to a fruteria, because the fruterias were the Chinese people in that area. So I went there, and they were so nice to me. And I said, hey, and I was crying. I was like, I need to go home. And they were like, okay. And they helped me. And then they walked with me a little bit. And I was like, okay, no, I can't. Absolutely. And so I did again this, because I was like, no, I'm too old to have to go through this again. I don't want to bother anymore. And so that's the last 1.5 year changed a lot. And I think that it would have been different if I was in the South or in a different kind of environment, because South, that wasn't my experience. But in Barcelona, for me, at my big age, I was just like, it is not enough anymore. Like, I need more community. Like, I need to see Black people thriving around me and not mostly begging. And I need to not feel like I am this Westerner. I need to see us. And even though I'm from a white country, the diaspora in Holland has taken up way more space for a long time. Different diasporas have been here since the 70s, 80s, and before that. There's a long history. Spain too, but it's different in Spain. So I wanted to go somewhere where people didn't notice me, and where for the time being, because I'm not going to stay here, but for the time being, and to want to thrive in my career, so I can, do whatever I wanted. I knew that Spain was going to break the confidence that I'd worked so hard on. And I need that confidence. Like, I need it more than I need the sun. It's why I left. And it's also, I really wish I went to Valencia. It was either I was going to try Valencia, or I was going to go back to Holland. Or I was going to go to Madrid maybe, but I didn't think so, because I needed a beach. But Barcelona is, yeah, all of us who live there or have lived there, it's a love-hate. And we defend our city and defend Barcelona, but living there, and if you go into the Facebook groups, there's just so much where it's very unlivable in many ways. And what I thought was the hardest is that it was difficult for me to integrate, because I went to the south for 6 months, into Nerja, Malaga area, Granada. And that's when I learned Spanish. Like, for the first time, I had Spanish friends. Like, when the first time people would say hi to me, I remember being so shocked that a bus driver in Malaga helped me go to another bus. Like, he went out of his bus, and he brought me to the next bus, and he was like so friendly, because I hadn't experienced that kind of friendliness in years in Barcelona.
Hey everyone, I hope you're enjoying this episode of Flourish in the Foreign. And if you are, please consider supporting this labor of love, but labor nonetheless, by buying me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/flourishforeign. Make sure that you are subscribed to the podcast, and please review the podcast on whatever platform you use to listen to the show. Fun fact, if you listen on Spotify, you can leave me comments that I can actually respond to. Yeah, Make sure you follow the podcast on Threads, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, and all the other social media platforms that the podcast has. If you want to read more of my personal truths and musings as I explore and navigate the intersection of migration, Blackness, womanhood, and wellness, be sure to subscribe to my Substack, Flourish in the Foreign, Truths and Musings by Christine Job. And for all other Flourish in the Foreign resources about moving, living, and thriving abroad, including guides, courses, and more, be sure to go to flourishintheforeign.com. All right. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Flourish in the Foreign. Now, back to the episode. I asked Joanne how she went about cultivating community while living in Barcelona.
In Dutch, we say it's double when things are like a bit two-sided. In one hand, it was Black women who made my transition to Spain very easy, because back then I was on Instagram, and before I even came to Spain, I Instagrammed a lot of women on Facebook, also WhatsApp groups, and they were also all new, so we all like banded together, and that was a great experience. But we were all new immigrants, and I remember at some point feeling as well that I wanted to connect also more with people from Spain, because that's something I wanted from the beginning, but it just wasn't happening. And then I was like, okay, maybe I can connect more with the immigrants from Spain who've been here, who are Spanish. But that was even more difficult in Barcelona because, again, Catalan culture is a specific culture that makes it hard to introduce new people the same way it's in Holland. So community was in and out in Barcelona. And I remember a friend asked me one time, she was like, would you be friends with them if you were in Holland? And I said, no. And she's okay, that's why. And that really changed a lot for me, because I realized I was befriending people because they were Black, but we didn't actually have things in common, or they weren't nice, or I wasn't nice to them, or like it wasn't a match. And so that couldn't be a reason to band together and to form community. But again, at the same time, it was difficult to find community with other people, because what would happen, I would find community more with other white Europeans. And that was, I think, sometimes actually easier for me than the community sometimes with Black people, because Black people is a broad word. That's people from everywhere in the world coming to Spain, whereas Black people in Holland were Dutch. So that's what we have in common. But I'm very European still, but I was raised on Tumblr and on Twitter. So I mimic or have seen a lot of Black American culture, but I'm not Black American. That was a thing. But I still have some friends from that whole experience, but most of us left. I remember my friends in Madrid was very different experience for them. They made lifelong friends, right? And also local friends and Spanish. But Barcelona is just like a friction, that city. Because Black is also a culture, like, so Black is, like, my mom told me that she didn't identify as Black until she came to Holland. Because in Suriname, she's a Maroon and she's Surinamese. And for her, Blackness is something that is very recent still. Like, yes, she's Black, and then like it doesn't really do much for her. But for me, I think Black is more of a thing because I feel culturally Black, because I learned it from Americans, and I learned it from the Black diaspora, young diaspora here in Holland, bonding together more, because our parents weren't bonding together here in Holland. And that's what I see this in Spain. In Spain, I see where my parent generation was, where, quote unquote, West Africans, the Caribbeans weren't mixing. The Caribbeans within weren't mixing, because people from Suriname speak Dutch very well. And people from the Dutch Antilles, for example, also speak Dutch, but sometimes with an accent. So they would like interfight with each other. So Black Dutchness became more of a culture recently. And in Spain, I can see them saying I'm not Black, because it's there isn't this universal Black culture yet there in a way where they band together, because I would see different groups of people doing things, similar things, and never connecting with each other, like doing like a collective, and then being very angry that another Black young people did a collective, because how dare they? There's just still this like, there's only space for one of us. And so when there isn't this connected Black culture yet in the diaspora, Blackness is not the first thing you think of because you're still trying to be Spanish and you're still trying to just like, you just got here and like you want them to accept you. And Blackness isn't something, and not to say that my mom wanted to be accepted by Dutch people. My mom didn't care about Dutch people in that way, but she didn't care about Blackness because she didn't need anything, she didn't need to defend it. The same way, I always say that like sexuality, we have names for it because you have to defend it. Otherwise, it's just you and your sexuality. That's just who you are. So when I was in Spain, I was like, oh, they just need more time. And if I stay here, I would have to be in a position where I don't try and like teach them and try to like help them because these are phases that them as like a Black society still have to go through the same way in England, in France, all these countries. But you see a difference between Spain, Italy, Germany, and Holland, Belgium, and France and England, where the diaspora has had more time to like go through the motions of you. Not unity is never going to happen, but like being on TV, being a doctor, like that normalcy. And Spain is not there yet. That is something that people, I think, when you visit, you think, oh, it makes sense. It's a white country, cool, whatever. But when you live there, it's like, okay, now what? This is it,
I had to ask Joanne what it has been like dating abroad.
So the reason I'm laughing is because So dating in Spain was, I think, also different for me than for other people because I'm a lesbian. And in queer and lesbian culture, every country has their what is like normal and what is considered like attractive and all these things. And in the beginning, when I came to Spain, I wasn't actually dating and I wasn't really interested in all these things. But then when I wanted to date, I realized that me being like a dark skinned like feminine presenting Black woman was a whole lot too much for like most of the Catalan lesbians, and they wouldn't clock me. Like I would go to a party and something, and they wouldn't understand that I was a lesbian. And when they would never come up to me, like not a day, and and they would just like stare at me like this. So like the same staring I would get from men outside, I would get from lesbians in our own parties. And I remember even last year, a friend of mine, she invited me to a lesbian party, and I didn't go to the suits anymore, but I went, and I literally left because I told her, "Do you see? This is what I mean." I was there for like hours dancing with a friend, and everybody was just staring at me, and they wouldn't come up to me. I see them talking about me. I see them like passing me a little bit, but they wouldn't come and dance. Like they wouldn't talk. Like, and so that means that I have to do that. That means that I have to go up to them. And when I was younger in Holland, I used to do that. Like I became like a dominant woman. And last year I was like, no, I refuse. I deserve romance. Like I deserve for somebody to come up to me. I deserve to be like swept away. And probably I don't like you if you are so afraid of me. So then we shouldn't be together. But then that was always my experience in Spain. My ex was actually somebody that I met online, and she came to Spain from a whole different country to live with me, obviously, because lesbians. But dating in Spain for me was not a thing, because even on the apps, would never get a match. And if I would get a match, I remember once this last year, this woman was like, yeah, but I'm not sure because I had a thing with a Black woman one time and like she ghosted me. So now I think all Black women are like this. And I was thinking, wow, she really typed that and hit send. Like she really typed that and hit send. That is something because again, when you think about faces of diaspora, there's still a lot of when it comes to racism, when it comes to language and the way you say things and aggression that Spanish people are currently now going through. So I was noticing that I was going to have to educate these people, and I didn't feel like it. So dating for me in like the lesbian community, rough and not interesting because I also didn't see a lot of people that I liked because the lesbian style that was in Spain was a style that I saw when I was young a lot, like this idea that you're only lesbian if you wear flannel and if you like, and so again, this every place is different, and Barcelona is a bit more edgy and a bit more like anarchist and stuff like that. Amsterdam can be like that as well, but it was mostly that. I was like, I want to like dress up, and but there wasn't my space for that, and I didn't want to educate people, so I didn't date in Spain. Not really, I didn't, and I would always think, am I dumb for positioning myself at this age in a place where I'm not desired? Is that smart? And I do think that it was one of the reasons why I left. There's many reasons why I left, because I made like a plus and minus list, and that dating was a huge reason. Not because I'm obsessed with dating, but I know that dating and love is just part of human experience, and I wanted to go somewhere where I was more decided, and Spain wasn't that place for me. Again, I don't create my life around dating, but at the same time, I want to honor it as part of my experience. Because sometimes I feel like it's almost as if people want to make you feel a type of way for wanting to date. And for me, I think I'm whole the way I am, and I live my life the way I want to. But yeah, I would like to go to a restaurant, and I do that already with my friends and with myself. But just like some romance, and in Spain, that just I knew that it wouldn't happen, and it wasn't happening, and I didn't miss it for a long time. And then I was like, okay, but maybe I should just go weekends to like Paris, to Amsterdam, to London, those three cities, so I can like date and just have a little romance and go back home to Spain. Like, and that isn't most of our goals. I mean, for me, it wasn't my goal to find romance in Spain. It was my goal to live well and to be happy and not use medication, because medication that I spoke about earlier that I used in Holland and I brought to Spain actually a year worth, never used in Spain. Didn't need it. So those things for a long time, the pluses were higher because I was generally fine.
Joanne decided to return to the Netherlands, and I asked her how she came to that decision.
I think that day when I realized I couldn't ask anybody for help at night, within 2 weeks, I was back in Holland. Yeah. And the thing is, I had spent last year talking to myself a lot, more and more, because I was very alone in the last like 6-7 months in Spain. And it gave me a lot of space to think. But the idea of leaving was never there, okay? Because I'd actually gone back, because I had gone to Holland for a few months after the breakup, and I'd come back to Spain. And like, I was immigrated for a long time already. I was never going to come back to Holland, never. Refused. But the more I started talking to myself about the life that I wanted, about freedom I want, about wanting to have a job that I actually like, doing it in my own time, traveling, feeling free, having my own home, all these things, the more I started thinking about it and then dealing with the stares, because I was running and people would come out of the restaurant to stare at me because I was like, yeah, which is like, I don't understand. I think it's almost like the universe was like, you need to leave, because it was insane. I was living it wasn't even like super up, because it was on the left side of Gracia. I forgot what it's called, like close to one of the mountains, but it was still in the city, in Eixample. People would stare at me. Like, I would go for a run, and this lady almost like heard her car, like looking at me, because it's almost this idea of like, why is this black girl running? Like, it was just a weird experience. So in one hand, the idea of what I wanted in my life was growing, and then the list of negatives of Spain was growing. Also, the smell. Okay, I can't deal with the smell of Barcelona. It's specific Barcelona, because I know when I went to Granada, it wasn't smelling like that. The smell, the dirt, I couldn't deal with that. Like, disorganization. Like, I'm from a very type A place. Dutch people, like, our tax goes to the street, we always say, because the street always needs to look pristine here. Everything needs to be clean, and all our houses are the same size, the same shape. And that's what I hated when I was here for the first time. I was thinking like, I can't do this anymore, but I'm gonna stay, and I'm gonna find a way, and I'm gonna like, become successful and do whatever I want here. I'm gonna just make it work. And then that day that I couldn't ask for help, I was like, no. And then for the first time ever, I made a pros and cons list because I think somewhere subconsciously didn't want to make pros and cons list. I didn't want to see the cons of Spain. I didn't want to write it down. And then I wrote it down, and then I viscerally saw that unfortunately to me, the list of negatives was longer. And the list of positives of going back to Holland was longer. And also because I knew that now I was going to go to Holland on my terms, not because my parents brought me, but because I am choosing to go there and because I am choosing to deal with them. I'm choosing to go here. And I think it was things like I wanted to go outside and get Surinamese food again. I wanted to go outside and see Black people again. I wanted to go outside and have people smile at me, and say hi. And I wanted to more of that. I wanted to use Holland has in my favor, which was I speak Dutch. I can code switch you very well. I have the degree for it. I know how to get a job here. I know how to get paid very well here. I'm going to use this country for what I want, and then I can leave again. Instead of trying to convince Catalan people to give me that, I was going to just go to the ones I understand, is what I told myself. And coming back has been great because I am here on my own terms. I am here the way my mom was here. It's my choice now. And I know still that we have free will and I don't have to do anything. I think my goal is next winter to leave. But yeah, I just paid my rent for February. That happened. And then the 27th, I was in Amsterdam with my cat. I had moved back.
Wellness. I asked Joanne, what is her current definition of wellness and how has her time abroad influenced her concept and practice?
I think it slowed me down in a positive way. My first memory is waiting in line for a chai latte and thinking I could do this faster. Because again, I come from an organized country and I didn't understand why it was taking this lady so long. And in that moment, accepting that I was going to wait a lot in Spain for everything and anything. And that helped me so much with somebody that has such a hyperactive mind. But at the same time, the world goes slow for me. Spain helped my nervous system so much. And it's so much doing nothing because the days are so long there, even if you work or not. So going for a hike, because Barcelona has a lot of what I call city mountains, that are right around in the city. So going to the mountain for hours, sitting in the beach for hours, walking, because, where I'm from, it's cycling, but walking for hours with no goal in sight. We're just going. All of that stillness, all of that time, that was wellness for me. That is wellness for me. And that has changed me. So even being back now here, I still take a lot of space for me to just do nothing and to be in nature and to slowly just plan my own life. And for me, the art of doing nothing was something that really helped me and that really made my hyperactivity sort of calm down and feel at peace. Because again, for me, that was the natural, like Ritalin for a long time, like a natural ADHD medication, which just being in a system, in a space where I personally could calm down. Because I know that for a Spanish person, even though they have a much more relaxed life, they are still working really, really hard. And I think people don't really realize that Spanish people work so many hours. Spanish people do a lot in a day, and they have also Spanish kids have long days. But as an outsider, I was chilling, and that really helped me, and that really gave me a lot of time to think and talk to myself about what I need. And I do think something that I think only people who immigrate understand is this realization that you can go anywhere at all times. Like, you can decide again that you're going to go somewhere else, or you can decide again that you're you go back, or that this ownership of your life, I do think it makes you more free and more like, this is my show. And that is what family gave me. Because again, because that's also why a lot of the trials and tribulations that I went through, I didn't register them for a long time, because I was just outside in the sun. And do know people think that sounds like a real, but I realized that for me, the weather is a really, really major thing. And then for a long time, the weather can overcompensate a lot. The space of life can overcompensate a lot for me. The good food can like the good, not the restaurants, but like the produce can overcompensate a lot for a long time. It can, so that was for me wellness. And this is something, this is how I am now. And this is going to be my whole life, where I'm going to go wherever I want to, and I will do what I want, and I will always prioritize feeling well and feeling good about things, regardless of what other people's idea of normalcy is. Because you have to let that go when you leave. You have to, when you immigrate, you have to let go idea of what it was normal back home. I think immigrating forces you to have to see yourself, because you don't have people anymore around you who are similar and who you can rely on your identity. Because for me, Spain made me more Dutch and more Surinamese and more Joanne. So now Joanne is like what I will defend forever.
Thank you so much, Joanne, for sharing your story with all of us. I really appreciate your candor and your vulnerability. If you are interested in keeping up with Joanne, you can online.
I only have LinkedIn by my own name, Joanne With, because I don't have a social media anymore, which is also part of my whole freedom. So they can totally connect with me on LinkedIn. And
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Flourish in the Foreign. To learn more information about this guest, be sure to check out their show notes page on the website flourishintheforeign.com. If you'd like me to come speak to your group, your organization, your sorority, your company, or any other type of entity, I can. Yes, did you know that? I can. I am available for paid speaking engagements, which includes in-person talks as well as remote talks. Yes, I do travel. I really do. If you're interested in booking me for an in-person or remote paid speaking engagement, you can find my media kit, my speaker page, and all booking information on the website flourishintheforeign.com, also on my personal website, christinejob.com, and in the description of this here episode. If you'd like to delve deep into my personal thoughts about life abroad, be sure to subscribe to my Substack, Flourish in the Foreign, Truths and Musings. If you enjoy this solo indie Black woman podcast, be sure to support this podcast by buying me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/flourishforeign. You can also support the podcast by subscribing to the podcast, leaving a review of the podcast, and of course, sharing the podcast. For resources like the Move Abroad with Intention guide and course, be sure to check the links in the description of this episode and the website flourishintheforeign.com. To learn more about me, Christine Job, my work as a business strategist, and all my resources about business strategy, building a business, and more, check out the links in the description of this episode and go to christinejob.com. Big thanks to all of you, my lovely listeners who have kept this podcast going strong for 6 seasons. Thank you all so much. I love you and I appreciate you. And thanks to Zachary Higgs for producing the music for this here podcast. Remember, it is not about moving abroad. It's not about being abroad. It's about thriving abroad. It's about flourishing abroad. So go abroad and cultivate a life well lived. See you next time. Bye. In the next episode of Flourish in the Foreign.
My education has been very much hands-on. I taught myself 6 languages. I taught myself my career. The way that education is taught in the United States particularly doesn't resonate with the way that I learn. Because of that, I left school to teach myself everything that I wanted to know, and I did it. So I didn't get the opportunity to study abroad. Instead, I just randomly decided to go abroad and learn on the job while being abroad, which honestly was such a rich and very educational experience, for better or for worse.